It's one of the biggest questions in the D.B. Cooper case, maybe the biggest. He got the money, $200,000. He jumped out of a plane with it, and then nothing. The money never turned up. Not a single one of the marked bills was ever spent. How could that much cash just vanish along with the man who took it? To get to the bottom of this, you have to understand what the money actually was. And what marked really means in this context. It's not like in the movies where a dye pack explodes. The FBI didn't have time for tricks like that. The hijacking happened fast. Northwest Orient Airlines had to get the cash together in Seattle on short notice. They went to a local bank and got what Cooper demanded, $200,000 in $20 bills. That's 10,000 individual notes. The FBI's plan was simple, and it was the best they could do under the circumstances. They decided to photograph the serial number of every single bill. They used a microfilm camera, snapping pictures of the stacks of 20s. This created a permanent record. Any bill from that ransom that turned up anywhere in the world at a bank, a casino, a store could be flagged. The serial number would pop up, and the FBI would know. They would have a lead. A location, a time, a person who spent it. That was the trap. The entire ransom was a giant invisible net. So Cooper jumps out of the back of a Boeing 727, somewhere over the dense, cold, rainy forests of southwest Washington. He has the money in a bank bag, probably tied to himself somehow. He has a parachute, and he disappears into the night. The plane lands safely. The manhunt begins. The FBI releases the list of 10,000 serial numbers to banks, law enforcement agencies, and even casinos across the country and the world. They wait for a hit, and they wait, and wait. A week goes by, nothing. A month, nothing. A year, nothing. Decades pass, still nothing. The net never caught a single fish. Not one of the 998 bills, we'll get to the ones that were found later, has ever been identified in circulation. This fact is the foundation for the most common, and perhaps most likely, theory about what happened to D.B. Cooper. He didn't make it. This isn't a satisfying answer for people who love a good mystery. We want the cunning thief to get away with it, to be living on a beach somewhere. But the reality of his jump was brutal. He jumped at about 10,000 feet at night into a thunderstorm. The wind speed at that altitude was over 100 miles per hour. The temperature outside the plane was well below zero, and with wind chill, it would have been something like minus 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Or he was wearing a business suit and a trench coat. He was not a professional skydiver. The parachutes he was given were not the advanced, steerable kind we have today. One was a standard military surplus parachute, and the other was a dummy chute from a training school that had been sewn shut, which he thankfully didn't choose. The terrain below was not friendly. It wasn't a farmer's field. It was the Cascade Mountain. Jagged peaks, deep canyons, dense forests with trees hundreds of feet tall. It was a wilderness. Even if he survived the initial fall, the landing would have been incredibly dangerous. He could have landed in a tree, breaking bones. He could have landed in a fast-moving, ice-cold river. He could have landed on a remote mountainside, far from any road, with serious injuries. Imagine him there, alone, in the dark, in a freezing storm, maybe with a broken leg. The money bag is heavy, weighing about 21 pounds. He's soaked, freezing, and lost. His chances of walking out of that forest alive were practically zero. The search was one of the most extensive in U.S. history. Hundreds of soldiers, FBI agents, and local police combed the suspected jump zone. They found nothing. No parachute, no skeleton, no trench coat, no money bag. If Cooper died on impact or shortly after, the money would have died with him. The bag containing the stacks of cash would be lying somewhere in that vast wilderness. Over time, it would be covered by dirt, leaves, and snow. The canvas bag would rot. The paper money, exposed to the elements, would decompose. Rain, snow, animals, insects. Within a few years, it would all turn to mulch. The money never showed up because it was reclaimed by the forest, just like the man who stole it. This is the simplest explanation. It requires no grand conspiracy or brilliant escape plan. It just requires a man to have made a very bad, very final mistake. For many investigators, this is where the story ends. Case closed, unofficially. But then, in 1980, the story got complicated. A young boy named Brian Ingram was on a picnic with his family on the banks of the Columbia River. The spot was called Tina Bar. He was digging in the sand, clearing a spot for a campfire, when his hands hit something strange. It was a bundle of rotted paper. He pulled it out. It was 3 packets of cash. The bills were stuck together, partially decomposed, and in terrible condition. His family, not thinking much of it, took them home. Later, they heard about the Cooper ransom serial numbers. They checked. It was a match. Brian Ingram had found a small piece of the D.B. Cooper ransom. It wasn't much, just $5,800 in $20 bills, two full bundles of 100 bills and a third partial bundle of 90. But it was proof. The money wasn't just a legend, it was real, and it had been out there. The discovery electrified the FBI and the public. This was the first real clue in 9 years. But instead of solving the mystery, the Tina Bar money only made it deeper. First, the location was confusing. Tina Bar was miles downstream from the flight path and well outside the original search zone. How did the money get there? Did Cooper land near the river and lose some of it? Did he bury it there? Did the money wash down from a tributary miles upstream where Cooper had actually landed? Scientists studied the bills. They found microscopic particles called diatoms on them. These tiny algae suggested the money had been in slow-moving fresh water. Some analysis suggested the money had been in the river for only a year or two, not the full 9 years since the hijacking. This led to theories that maybe Cooper buried the money in a flood, or erosion unearthed it years later and washed it into the river. Other experts looked at the way the bundles were still held together by rubber bands. They argued that if the money had tumbled down a river for miles, the packets would have broken apart. This suggested the money was deposited very close to where it was found. Perhaps someone found the money years after the hijacking and threw a few bundles into the river to create a false trail. Or maybe Cooper himself came back and did it. The condition of the money was also a clue. It was found in 3 distinct packets. If the whole bag of money had been in the river, you'd expect to find more scattered bills, not just 3 neat bundles. And what about the rest of it? Over $194,000 was still missing. If this small portion washed up, where was the rest? The discovery of the money at Tina Bar simultaneously proved that the ransom had landed on the ground, but it also opened up a whole new set of questions that nobody could answer. It didn't fit neatly into the he died on impact theory, but it didn't really support the he got away theory either. It was just an anomaly. A ghost from the past that offered no clear explanation. So, let's entertain the other possibility. Let's say he survived, he made the jump, landed safely, and walked out of the woods with 21 pounds of cash. He was a free man with a fortune. Now, we are back to the original question, why didn't he spend it? So, this is where the psychology of the crime and the practicalities of the 1970s come into play. One theory is that he lost the money during the jump. The bank bag wasn't a secure piece of skydiving equipment. It was just a bag. The force of the wind opening the parachute is immense. It could have easily ripped the bag from his grasp. Or the bag itself could have torn open, scattering 10,000 pieces of paper into the storm over hundreds of square miles. He might have landed safely, but empty-handed. In this scenario, he survived, but the money was lost forever, scattered across the forest floor to slowly rot away. This would explain why he never spent it and why the bulk of it was never found. The Tina Bar money could have been a single chunk that happened to land in a creek that fed into the Columbia River. Another, more compelling theory is that Cooper was smart. He was meticulous enough to plan the hijacking, specify the type of parachutes, and choose a plane with aft stairs that could be opened in flight. A man that careful might have anticipated that the FBI would record the serial numbers. He might have known from the beginning that the money was a trap. If he knew the bills were traceable, spending them would be foolish. Walking into a bank with a stack of 20s from the ransom list was a guaranteed trip to prison. Using them to buy a car or a house would be just as risky. The serial numbers were out there. The risk of one of them being flagged was very real, especially in the first few years after the hijacking. So what would he do? He'd have to sit on it. He couldn't use it. The money was his trophy, but it was also his prison. He won the game, but he couldn't claim the prize. This leads to another idea. Maybe the money wasn't the main point. Maybe the hijacking was about something else. The thrill. The challenge. Proving he could beat the system. Some people have profiled Cooper as a former military man, someone with experience in covert operations who was maybe disillusioned or just bored. For a man like that, pulling off the perfect crime might have been the goal itself. The money was just a way to keep score. If that's the case, he might have just stashed the money somewhere, or even destroyed it, content with the knowledge that he had done the impossible. But what if he did want to spend it? How could he have done it without getting caught? The most common suggestion is that he would have spent it very slowly and in very small amounts. A 20 here for gas, a 20 there for groceries. In the 1970s, cash was king. There were no databases tracking every transaction. You could live a very long time on cash without raising suspicion. A single $20 bill passed in a busy store or bar would almost certainly go unnoticed. The cashier wouldn't check a serial number. It would go into the till, get bundled with other bills, and be sent to the bank. The problem is the scale. 10,000 bills. Even if he spent one bill every single day, it would take him over 27 years to go through the entire ransom. That's a long time to be looking over your shoulder, and the risk never completely goes away. Eventually, one of those bills would land on a bank teller's counter who was having a slow day, or it would be run through a new machine designed to spot certain serial numbers. It's a constant low-level risk. Maybe he was disciplined enough to do this. Maybe he moved to a different country where the serial numbers were less of a concern and slowly exchanged the money. It's possible, but it requires incredible patience and a nerve of steel. 4 decades. There's also the idea of laundering the money. Could he have taken it to Las Vegas? In the 70s, casinos were a lot less regulated than they are today. He could have bought chips with the ransom money, gambled a little to make it look good, and then cashed out, receiving clean, untraceable bills in return. This is a plausible way to wash a large amount of cash, but it's also very risky. A guy walking into a casino with $200,000 in 20s would attract attention. A lot of attention. Even in Old Vegas, casino employees are trained to spot suspicious activity. And the FBI had specifically alerted casinos to be on the lookout for the Cooper bills. It would have been a huge gamble, and not at the card table. Another possibility is that he used criminal connections to launder the money. He could have sold the hot money to another criminal for a fraction of its face value. For example, he could sell the $200,000 for, say, $50,000 in clean cash. The buyer then takes on the risk of slowly feeding the marked bills into circulation. This happens in the criminal underworld, but it requires connections. D.B. Cooper, based on the testimony of the flight crew, didn't seem like a typical hardened criminal. He was polite, calm, and articulate. He seemed more like a disgruntled white-collar worker or a veteran than a mobster. It's hard to imagine him having a ready-made network to launder a fortune. Let's consider one final, he survived, scenario. He lands, finds a good hiding spot, and buries the money. His plan is to lay low for a while, let the heat die down, and then come back for it later. It's a classic movie trope, but the wilderness is not a movie set. A spot that seems memorable in the dead of night can look completely different in the daylight. Trees fall, landscapes change, he might have simply been unable to find it again. Or maybe he got away from the area but was arrested for an unrelated crime and spent years in prison, unable to retrieve his loot. Or perhaps he died of natural causes a year or two later, taking the secret of the money's location to his grave. In any of these cases, the money would remain hidden, a buried treasure waiting for a lucky hiker who will likely never find it. The passage of time has also changed the nature of the problem. It has now been over 50 years. A $20 bill from 1969, which is what most of the ransom was, is now a relatively old piece of currency. Many have been taken out of circulation by the Federal Reserve as they become worn out. The chances of one of the Cooper bills still being in the cash register somewhere is getting smaller every year. And furthermore, the FBI officially closed its active investigation into the Cooper case in 2016. They decided their resources were better spent on other priorities. The serial numbers are still on file, of course. If a bundle of the cash were to turn up tomorrow, the case would be instantly reopened. But the massive proactive search is over. The world has moved on. So, we're left with a set of possibilities, none of them provable. The most probable answer is the least romantic one. The money never showed up because D.B. Cooper died in the woods and the cash rotted away with him. The forest is a powerful force, and it doesn't take long for it to swallow up every trace of a man and his stolen fortune. The Tina Bar find is a strange outlier, a piece of the puzzle that doesn't quite fit, but it doesn't necessarily disprove the theory. It could have been a small part of the whole that had a unique journey to the riverbank. The other possibilities are more compelling because they allowed the legend to live. If he lost the money on the way down, he might have walked away, a man who pulled off the perfect crime but had nothing to show for it but the story he could never tell. If he knew the money was traceable, he might have lived the rest of his life as an ordinary person, with a bag of unusable cash hidden under his floorboards, a constant reminder of his brief, audacious moment of fame. And if he was smart and patient, he might have spent it 120 at a time, a ghost in the system, so careful that he never once made a mistake. Ultimately, the reason no one's ever claimed the D.B. Cooper ransom money is the same reason no one knows who D.B. Cooper was. The end of the story happened in the dark, in the middle of a storm, over a vast and unforgiving wilderness. The key witness was the forest, and it has kept its secrets. The money is a ghost, just like the man. Its absence is the final, silent piece of evidence in a case that will probably never be solved. It tells us that whatever happened up there in the sky and down there in the trees did not go according to plan. Either Cooper's plan or the FBI's. Someone lost. And it seems very likely that everyone did.